Welcome to the next video in the IMSAI 8080 CP-A Rev 4 build series. In this video, we're going to install the voltage regulator, heatsink, tantalum capacitors, etc. So brickyte and screwdriver so we can mount that heatsink. So we're into the regulator and heatsink section of the installation. There's some things to note here. I've got the original board here, and you notice the heatsink is delivered. It's got 90-degree bends on all the tabs, and you can see the regulator that's in place has all those tabs bend over, and that again is to make clearance for the panel that mounts on the front of the machine. As I've said many times, too many bend LEDs, they distract me. That red bezel sits down just barely above the tips of the LEDs, and this is just too tall. So they have you in this paragraph right here, bend those leads outward. If you look in a little more detail here, and hopefully you can see it, this tab right here interferes with this LED here. And so it's bent over 90 degrees to make room for that LED to poke through. So you have to mechanically change the heatsink physically in order to clear everything. So I'm going to do that next. Heatsink mounts there. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flare out. Let me put on some glasses, make it a little easier for me to see. I'm going to flare out. So the hole's important here. I've got the heatsink in place where the screw holes line up. I know that the center tab on this side is the one for the LED. I'm not going to choose to bend it out right now. I'll deal with it separate. Hopefully I'm flexing these out enough. In my test builds, I have had to come back and actually bend these over a little bit further to get proper clearance. And of course, all 5 on this left-hand side of it get bent out, and those aren't real square to each other, which disappoints me. So now I'm going to work to square these all up. Want it to look nice. I keep harping on make it look nice. That'll sit there like so. Those look good. We're on this original board. Somebody chose to take the tab here, the center one, and bend it over 90 degrees. And you could do that. I'm just going to fold it in once this is all mounted together. So it'll point inwards. That's just the path I'm going to take. I find that to be a little bit easier. However you want to approach it, is up to you. So we've gotten through that step 28. To install the regulator and heatsink first, bend the regulator at least at 90-degree angles to a pattern of the CP-A board. So I take the voltage regulator and I hold it in place, and I can see visually. Oh, come here, you. The center pin in it, I don't know if this will show up or not. There's a wider shoulder on the pins and then a narrow, I can't say the word, a thinner section that gets soldered. And I know that this one gets bent right at that transition from wide to narrow. And I'm going to bend it around 90 degrees. And I'm going to drop it in place. And I can see that the screw hole lines up perfectly. And these get bent about there. I'm going to try to bend this one in the same place. So again, it looks nice and symmetrical. I didn't get it in exactly the same place, but it's close enough. Anna has come to visit again. I'm going to drop it down in place. I can see that I need to massage these leads a bit to get them to fall into the holes on the board. Having those tantalum capacitors in place makes it a little bit harder to do, but that dropped in well. It sits in nice. Let's see. Insert the regulator. I use a number 6 screw on the component side of the board and lock washer and nut on the solder side. Okay, that's also the approach I always take. I'm going to slide the heatsink up underneath the regulator. Notice I haven't soldered in the regulator yet, and there's a reason for that. And I'm going to bring the screw up through, assuming I can get everything kind of lined up. It's being awfully stubborn here. Let's grab a little Phillips and work everybody into alignment. I'm going to bring the screw up through, and like I said, I have not soldered the regulator yet. I'm going to take the little lock washer. Is it this one that's floating around here? It must be. No, that's really not the right lock washer. It's way too large. I don't remember if the lock washer was actually in the bag or not. It's not critical right now. It's just there to hold things together a little better. Come here, little lock washer. Get the nut down in place. And actually having this little Phillips here is handy because I can use it to start the screw. I want to get the heatsink squared up, the regulator squared up, and tighten that up, and hopefully everything stayed square. And it did. Normally you'd put a bit of heatsink compound there between the regulator and the heatsink. I didn't put the compound on. Don't even know if it calls for compound. The reality of this newer board is these LEDs draw a lot less current than the originals, and so the regulator doesn't have to work as hard. And those LS logic substitutions, they're low power Schottky, that's what the LS means, also draw less current, so it doesn't run as hot. A little bit of thermal compound still would have been good. But by having this all screwed together and torqued down, I've still got the leads floating here in here to be soldered. Had I soldered those originally right up front, when I tightened this up, it would have twisted the regulator and put mechanical torque on those connections, and it makes them less reliable. So once everything mechanically is secured, go ahead and solder then. If you solder the regulator ahead of time and then torque everything down, just reflow the joints to take that mechanical stress out. I like to see that the solder's flowed well through and created a good puddle on the front of the board. And I can add more solder to these. It's not as soldered as well as it could be. I can see now the solder has flowed through, and I've got good solder fillets on both the front and back of the board. I've got one lead that's a bit long here. We'll take it off. I'll now come in here and I'll bend this third tab inward. Oh, that is tough. I'll have to use a tool. My finger isn't strong enough. And I'm just going to bend this third one inward to create the clearance. And then by mounting these two tantalum capacitors high, I can simply fold them over inward like that and create the clearance we need. So that really should get the voltage regulator in place. Number 6 screw, tighten the screw carefully to ensure proper alignment, to prevent shorting to adjacent traces. I think we're good there. We come down to the switch installation, and that is a project on its own. It will be in a future video. I'm not going to tackle that here, but this might be a good time to step back and just take a look at what we've done. All the LEDs with the flats facing down, I visually confirmed that. All the ICs with the pin 1 markings facing to the right, it's notches, and a couple of packages, it's a dimple. Don't be confused. Some packages have a notch and a dimple. The dimple is something else. The notch indicates the pin 1 side, all the notches. Off to the right, we got the proper capacitors here, here, and here. We've got the diode where the diode goes. We've got the 270K ohm resistor where it goes. We know these are 47K, all 6 of them here. I'm not as happy with that capacitor. It's fine. It could have been a little square. It's fine. I can see looking at this that I still need to bend these tabs over further. I can see that they're pointing up higher than the LEDs. So they need to be flexed over a little bit more. Like I say, this is how it was originally done. It's the original manual we're building from. We don't want these fins touching the back of that plastic bezel or filter, or whatever it's called. These could be bent down a little bit more. I just hit a capacitor with a finger here and bend it over. I hate that. I hate bending capacitors over. So we've got, I can see there's clearance. The top of the LEDs, there's no clearance on all the fins of the regulator. Well, that's not a good level. Yeah, we're absolutely fine. There's plenty of clearance there. I got clearance to all the capacitors. That bigger one had to be folded over. So really, I think, besides the socket or the switches, that's an assembled panel. There's a whole lot to talk about when we get to the switches. Like I said, we'll tackle that in the next video. I'm going to wrap this one up here. I need to be done, I think, for the day. This is a lot to get done in one day for me. I've gotten to where I wanted to today with the build. We'll pick it up in the next video. Appreciate you watching the video. Channel subscriptions, always nice to have. Comments, etc., nice to have. A like on the video would even be appreciated. So it looks like in the next video we're going to install the ribbon cable on the CP-A panel. So I hope to see you in that video.